A few years ago, a student who was studying leadership asked to interview me about my approach to leadership. And I was very impressed because they had done their homework, and one of the questions was this. They said, when we see you preach, you often talk about your mistakes, how you've messed up, how the only reason that you feel like you have any authority to talk about certain things isn't because you think you've figured it out, but because you've messed it up so many times, you might have experience for how not to mess that up and how God and how the Word has helped you get through that. Why do you do that? And I smiled and thought about that for a moment. I was like, because that's reality. Because that's reality. And I don't know about you, but in my reality, my faith has grown far more during the times that I have been weak, when I have needed grace, when I have made mistakes, and I'm not feeling all that, than when I have been at my strongest, when I have been at my best. And the thing is, that's not always what society and even the church reflects sometimes or says sometimes. A lot of times people will come out and say, oh, I've got this, and they'll come out and they're like, my faith is strong. And you know how you know my faith is strong? It's because things are going well for me. Things are going well for me, so my faith must be strong. My prayer life must be good. Don't worry, you see, I'm strong, I'm good. And some of the people are really strong, and they've got this big faith. And there are other people who are doing this, and they're faking it. That's the question is, sure, it is fine to have a strong faith when everything is going well, but I believe in my heart that faith at its strongest is when we are at our weakest. That is when it is most needed. Not when we have the strength to run, not when we have the strength to jump tall buildings in a single bound, but when we only have the strength to crawl. And so my question for you all today is this. Not whether you have the faith to show faith when things are going well, but do you have that greater strength that it takes the faith to crawl? Do you have the strength to crawl? And that's what we're going to talk about in the scripture today, starting in Mark chapter 5, verses 21 through 34. We start hearing when Jesus had crossed again in the boat to the other side of the Sea of Galilee. Jesus had gone over to the Gentile section of the Sea of Galilee, and now Jesus is coming back. So he's back from the other side, just getting off the boat, and there are a bunch of people waiting for him on the other side because Jesus is becoming very famous. And then, one of those power words in the Bible, right? Then one of the leaders of the synagogue named Jairus came, and when he saw him, fell at his feet and begged Jesus to save his daughter. And they start to go to Jairus' house, and then they're sort of in town, and the crowd begins to grow and grow and grow, and then this woman who heard that Jesus is coming by says, maybe he can help me. And that sets the stage for the story and the tension in the story today. As it said at the beginning, they're at the shore of the Sea of Galilee. Jesus has just come off the boat from the trip across the Sea of Galilee to the Gentile section, just healed a person who had been possessed by many things, multiple personalities, what back then they called many demons, and had healed that person. Now he was coming back here, and people were waiting for him, a big crowd. And Jairus, a leader of the synagogue, did something that leaders of synagogues do not often do, and dropped in the dirt on his knees to Jesus. And he didn't say, "Sir, will you help my daughter?" How might that have sounded? "Jesus, will you please, 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 my daughter is dying. Will you please come to my house and lay hands on her? Please, I know nothing else is working. Will you please come to my house and save my daughter?" Which is a big deal for a synagogue leader to do at that time. And Jesus says yes, and nobody would have thought anything of it. They would have thought, oh, okay, great. Jesus is about to do a miracle. They would have thought it's amazing. But because he was doing it for a leader of a synagogue, they would have thought nothing of it. But they hear that Jesus is going to do this miracle, and so the crowd gathers more and more and more and more, and they start to go through the town, approaching where Jairus' house is, and they're in the town, and more and more and more people are coming, and people are surrounding Jesus. They're in front of him, behind him, they're above, below, they're right across him, and Jairus is going, and they're walking along, and this woman who said they were going to try to get to Jesus is trying to get to Jesus and can't get to Jesus because of the crowd. And so I know the reading says, and she walked up to Jesus and reached out and touched his cloak, and she was made well, but I don't think that's how it went. And I admit, this is not the description, but based on the translation, it doesn't say that she reached out and touched his cloak. The original translation says she bent down and touched the hem of his garment, which means she got down on her knees and got down on her hands and crawled on the ground between the legs of the people and reached out for the hem of his garment with the tiny shred of faith that maybe if I just touch the hem of his garment, I will be okay. Additional layer of tension. What is her problem? She's been bleeding for 12 years. So to make this clear, sorry if this makes anybody uncomfortable, she has not been able to have her period stop for 12 years. She's bleeding from there for 12 years. And the rules are that when you are bleeding or you've been in contact with blood, you are unclean and cannot associate in society. She has no family. She has no husband. She has no boyfriend because they can't be near her. Anybody who comes close to her or touches her is ritually unclean and would have to leave and not be able to be in the area. So she has been shunned, she's been thrown out, and she's been just taking clothes and just like trying. They didn't have the modern things that women have today in these situations. She is there. And there's probably blood on her clothes. There may be blood on her hands. And she's on her hands and knees. And this is my last chance. And she's been told she's worth nothing. She's been told she's not welcome in town. She's been probably trying to hide herself getting through there and then getting down on the ground and saying, if I can only get to the hem of his cloak and touch the hem. And she does. And the only two people who know it are her and Jesus. She knows it because she feels that she's been made well. He knows it because he just felt that he healed somebody. And he stops to his disciples like, who touched me? The disciples are like, Jesus, you're kidding, right? Like, you're kidding. You see all these people? Like, everybody's touching you. Like 100 people are touching you. What do you mean? Who touched you? But she knows. And he knows. So the scene starts to focus like a spotlight on him and her. And she gets up. And it says in fear and trembling. And you don't usually hear that for someone who just got healed. Usually they're celebrating or thanking, but she's there in fear and trembling. Why? Maybe because she did it under secret and she was concerned, or maybe she knew. Maybe she knew and she was trying to do it in secret because she knew if she touched him when she was bleeding, he would be sacramentally unclean and not be able to go heal his daughter. So she's petrified of what might happen by being discovered, not just for herself, but for what might happen to Jesus and what might happen to her because she just did something that might have put somebody else's life at risk, that one of the leaders of the synagogue. And so the daughter, she comes up, the woman comes up, the unnamed woman comes up to Jesus and says, it was me. And she's down on the ground, scared. And people have probably cleared away because they either know who she is or maybe see some of the blood or see something that's going on here. And Claire is seen out and the spotlight's right there. And they're wondering, what is Jesus going to do here? He looks at her. He calls her his child. Your faith has made you well, and lifts her up. My child, rise. He knows there's blood on her. He knows what this implies in front of everybody. But Jesus doesn't care about the ritual. Jesus cares about the person. The person crawling to him, desperate in faith for one chance at life after bleeding out for 12 years. And so not only is she cured from a physical sense, but she is allowed and welcomed back into society. Blessed. And then we know later in the passage immediately after, Jesus goes on to the leader of the synagogue's house and heals the daughter. Nobody minding about whether he had touched someone that made him ritually unclean because he didn't care either. But did her faith alone make her well? If she had stayed at home in faith, would she have been cured? No. Her faith took her out of the despair of the past 12 years, of the failed doctors, of the failed other people, took her out of the despair of wherever she had been isolated away from society, and gave her a shred of hope, a little, small shred of hope that her life could be better. The faith gave her the hope to go take an action. And she couldn't run. She was too weak. She wasn't strong in her faith. She was just like, maybe if I crawl on the ground and reach between the legs and just get the hem of his garment, I will be healed. Where do you need to be healed? And do you have the strength to crawl and reach out just for the hem of Jesus' garment on the hope that that will help? Because that is all it takes. It doesn't take the big, bold strength, faith. It takes the bolder strength of weakness, of in our weakness admitting there is a different strength than our own, that if we just have the faith to have a shred of hope to take an action to reach out for that hem. Because this church, churches in general, aren't meant to be sanctuaries for the strong. They're meant to be fellowships of the crawling, with each of us in our respective weakness, crawling alongside each other, and in so doing, supporting each other, saying, it is okay to crawl. You don't have to pretend you're standing. It's okay. I'm trying to crawl to Jesus too. I believe and I know that I am scared of what's going on in my physical person. I know that I'm scared of what's going on in my personal relationship. I know I'm scared about what's going on in this town. I know that I'm scared about what's going on in this country. But I have the faith to just have a little hope. If I cling to Jesus, if I reach out to the hem and just follow him that way, that I will get some of that energy, some of that direction, some of that guidance to help make things better. So if you think that when your faith is small and just a little bit, to just give you a little bit of hope, that isn't a strong faith, if that gets you to crawl, I say that is the strongest kind of faith I have ever seen and I have ever known. Crawling is enough. Crawling may be the strongest thing that you ever give yourself permission to do. And if you are in a place that you are strong and you can walk, that is great. But I ask you to walk along with the people who are crawling and try to help them and try to help them up. And if they can't get up, then get down and crawl with them, so that they know they're not alone, so that you can help them. But in addition to that, that's where you're going to meet Jesus. Because Jesus is on the ground crawling right alongside them. And if you're feeling like you can leap that tall building in a single bound and you can run, then run alongside the people who are crawling. But help them with those resources of energy and spirit and whatever resources you have to help them. And if they can't get up even with that help, then get down on the ground and crawl with them too, because it will help them, but it will help you, because that's where you're going to find Jesus. In the crawl. In the strength of the small faith that gives the small hope that says, I am going to be strong enough to follow that small hope and reach out for that hem. Because crawling is enough. The hem of Jesus' garment is enough. That reaching out is enough. And Jesus will call you again and again and again, call you his child and lift you up. Because whether you believe it or not, every one of you is more than enough. Every one of you is more than enough. Amen.